The rancher wanted his land back, but the Apache widow and her 5 children made him stay. He had not planned to stay long. The rancher drove slowly along the old dirt road, dust rising behind his truck like a memory that refused to settle. This land had once been his father's pride, spread wide under the open sky, fenced carefully, worked with patience and belief. Now it looked tired. The wooden posts leaned at odd angles, some broken, some missing. Dry grass covered fields that had once been green. The main house stood quiet, windows dark, paint peeling under the harsh sun. He parked the truck and stepped out. The wind carried the smell of earth and age. For a moment, he simply stood there, hands on his hips, looking around. He told himself this visit was only business. The plan was clear in his mind. Take control of the land, settle the papers, sell it, and move on. He had built a life far away. This place belonged to the past, and the past had already taken enough from him. As he walked toward the house, memories came without permission. His father fixing a fence at sunrise, his voice firm but calm, his boots leaving deep marks in the soil. The rancher shook his head as if to push those images away. He unlocked the door and stepped inside. Dust floated in the air, glowing in the light that slipped through cracked curtains. The furniture was still there, covered in sheets. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt distant. After a short time, he went back outside. That was when he noticed the smoke in the distance, thin and steady. At first, he thought it might be a small fire or a neighbor passing through, but the rancher knew this land well. That smoke was coming from inside his property line, far toward the east side, near the low hills. His jaw tightened. No one was supposed to be living here. He got back into the truck and drove toward the smoke, the road growing rougher as he moved away from the main house. After a few minutes, he saw them. A small settlement, simple and quiet. A worn wooden shelter patched with tin and cloth. A cooking fire burning low. 5 children sat nearby, some barefoot, some watching the ground, others watching him with wide, cautious eyes. And standing in front of them was the woman. She did not step forward or back. She simply stood straight and still, her face calm but alert. Her dark hair was tied back. Her clothes were plain, worn from work and weather. There was no fear in her posture, only readiness. She had seen hard days before. The rancher stepped out of his truck slowly. He felt like an intruder, even though this land was legally his. The children gathered closer to the woman, not hiding, but forming a quiet line of trust behind her. "I didn't know anyone was living here," he said, keeping his voice steady. The woman nodded once. "We have been here for years." Her voice was soft but firm. English was not her first language, but she spoke clearly, choosing her words with care. "This is my land," he replied, more sharply than he intended. "I know," she said. "Your father knew us." That stopped him. She explained that her husband had worked this land alongside his father. They had fixed fences together, shared meals, survived droughts and storms. When her husband became ill and later passed away, she stayed. There was nowhere else to go. No anger filled her words. She spoke as if stating facts that could not be changed by emotion. The rancher looked at the children again, 5 of them, different ages. One held a stick drawing lines in the dirt. Another clutched a small cloth doll. They were thin but clean. Their eyes followed every movement he made. He felt something shift inside his chest, something uncomfortable. "I came to take the land back," he said honestly. "I plan to sell it." The woman did not raise her voice. She did not argue, she simply met his eyes. "We will go if we must," she said, "but this land is all they know." The silence that followed was heavy. The wind moved through the grass. A bird cried out from somewhere unseen. He had expected anger. He had prepared himself for confrontation. Instead, he found quiet dignity, and it unsettled him more than shouting ever could. "I need time," he said finally. She nodded again, accepting that much and nothing more. As he drove back to the main house, his thoughts tangled. He reminded himself of reality. This was business, responsibility. He had bills, plans, a future that did not include broken fences and old promises. Yet the image of the children stayed with him, their quiet watching, the way they trusted that woman completely. That night he slept poorly. The house creaked in the dark. Every sound felt louder than it should. He dreamed of his father standing by the fence line, saying nothing, only watching. In the morning he walked the land. He saw signs of care where he had expected neglect. Crops planted carefully, tools cleaned and stacked, water carried long distances. Someone had loved this place even when it had nothing left to give. By midday, he saw the children again, this time closer to the main house. They were collecting fallen wood. One of them waved shyly. Before he could stop himself, he raised his hand in return. He told himself it meant nothing, but deep down, he knew the land was already asking him a question he was not ready to answer, and this was only the beginning. The next few days passed slowly, but the tension never left. The rancher stayed busy around the main house, fixing small things that did not really need fixing. A loose hinge, a broken step. He told himself it was only to make the place ready for sale. Still, his eyes kept drifting toward the east side of the land, where the widow and her children lived. He decided it was time to make things clear. One afternoon, he drove back toward their shelter. The children saw the truck first and stopped what they were doing. They stood still, watching. The woman stepped forward again, just as calm as before. She wiped her hands on her skirt, waiting. "I need to talk," he said. She nodded and motioned toward a fallen log. They both sat, leaving space between them. The children stayed close, pretending not to listen, though every word mattered to them. "I've checked the papers," the rancher said. "The land is mine, there's no dispute about that." "I understand," she replied. "There are laws," he continued. "I can't ignore them." She looked at the ground for a moment, then back at him. "There are also promises," she said quietly. That word stayed in the air. She told him more this time, how his father had allowed them to build there. How her husband had worked without asking for much, only a place to raise his family. How they had never asked for ownership, only shelter and respect. When her husband passed away, the father had told her she could stay as long as she needed. "He said the land remembers those who care for it," she said. The rancher felt a tightness in his chest. His father had been a man of quiet actions, not written agreements. He trusted people, too much maybe. "I'm not my father," the rancher said. She did not argue. "No," she said, "but you are his son." That night the rancher called a lawyer. He spoke about eviction, about timelines, about legal steps. The words sounded cold even to his own ears. When the call ended, he sat alone in the dark, the phone heavy in his hand. He told himself he was doing the right thing, the sensible thing. The next morning he went out early to check the fence line. The sun had barely risen when he heard footsteps behind him. One of the children stood there, holding a piece of bread wrapped in cloth. "My mother sent this," the child said softly. The rancher hesitated, then took it. "Thank you." The child nodded and ran back toward the hills. He stood there longer than he meant to, holding the bread. It was warm. As days passed, he noticed small things. The children carried water every morning without complaint. The woman worked from sunrise to nightfall. They wasted nothing. They argued little. Their life was hard, but it was honest. Still, he reminded himself of his purpose. He spoke to neighbors. Some said the land should be cleared. Others said his father had been kind, maybe too kind. No one gave him an easy answer. One evening, he drove past the shelter and saw the children struggling to fix part of the roof. A strong wind had torn a sheet loose. Without thinking, he stopped and helped secure it. No one thanked him loudly. No one made it a big moment. They simply worked together until it was done. When he turned to leave, the woman said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied. That night he realized something troubling. He no longer saw them as a problem to remove. He saw them as people tied to the land in ways paper could not measure, but pressure kept building. The lawyer called again. Time was moving. Decisions had to be made. One afternoon, the rancher finally said the words out loud. "I will need you to leave." The children froze. The woman closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them, there were no tears. "When?" she asked. "Soon," he said. She nodded, accepting the weight without complaint. As he drove away, his hands shook on the wheel. He told himself this was necessary. Still, his chest felt heavy, like he was walking away from something important. That night, a storm rolled in suddenly. Wind howled across the land. Rain fell hard and fast. The rancher lay awake, listening. Then he thought of the shelter, thin walls, loose roof. Without thinking, he got dressed and drove toward the hills. The shelter had taken damage. Water leaked inside. The children huddled together. The woman stood firm, trying to protect them. He worked through the rain, reinforcing the walls, covering gaps, using whatever he could find. The storm lasted hours. When it finally eased, everyone was soaked and exhausted. They stood there in the quiet that followed. "Thank you," the woman said. He nodded, unable to speak. As he drove back, soaked and tired, one thought would not leave him. This was no longer about land, and the choice ahead would change everything. After the storm, the land felt different. The air was clean, the ground dark and rich, and the silence carried weight. The rancher woke late that morning, his body sore from the night's work. For a long time, he sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. He could still hear the rain in his mind, still see the children huddled together, trusting him without asking for anything in return. He tried to focus on his plan, papers, phone calls, deadlines, but his thoughts kept returning to the shelter near the hills. That afternoon, he walked there instead of driving. The path was uneven and the wet earth clung to his boots. When he arrived, the children were outside, collecting branches knocked down by the storm. They stopped when they saw him, unsure of what to do. He raised his hand gently. "It's all right," he said. The woman stepped out of the shelter. She looked tired but steady. "You should not have come last night," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I couldn't stay away." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Come, sit." They sat on the ground, the children nearby. No one rushed to speak. After a while, she began to talk, not to defend herself, not to ask for mercy. She spoke because the truth had waited long enough. She told him about her husband, how he had been a quiet man who believed in work more than words, how he had treated the land with respect, never taking more than needed, how he had fallen ill after years of labor, and how the world had grown very small after that. She spoke of raising 5 children with little help, of nights spent wondering how to keep them warm, of days filled with strength she did not know she had. The rancher listened. He did not interrupt. She spoke of his father too, how the older man had visited often, how he had helped fix tools, shared meals, and never made them feel like outsiders. He said this land had room for all who cared for it, she said. The rancher swallowed hard. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "I left because I couldn't breathe here," the rancher said quietly. "Everything reminded me of him," she nodded. "Grief makes us run." That simple sentence struck him deeply. Over the next weeks, the distance between them slowly changed. He did not promise anything. She did not ask, yet they began to share the land without words. He fixed fences. She planted crops. The children followed him around, curious but respectful. They asked him about animals, about tools, about stories from when the land was alive with cattle and noise. He found himself laughing again, something he had not done in a long time. One evening, one of the children brought him a drawing made in the dirt. It showed the hills, the shelter, the house, and a small figure between them. "That's you," the child said. He stared at it longer than necessary. The lawyer called again. Papers were ready. All he had to do was sign. That night he walked the land alone. The stars were bright, the wind soft. He realized the land was not asking him to choose between right and wrong. It was asking him to remember who he was. The next day he sat with the woman again. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. She looked at him kindly. Sometimes staying is braver than leaving. He did not answer. A few days later, one of the children fell ill. Nothing serious, but enough to worry a mother with little help. The rancher drove them to town without being asked. He waited outside, pacing. When they returned, the child slept peacefully in the back seat. The woman whispered, "You are already part of their life." He felt the truth of that settle into his bones. The pressure from outside grew. Neighbors asked questions. The lawyer waited. Time moved forward whether he was ready or not. One morning he stood at the fence line his father once built. The wood was old but strong. He rested his hand on it and finally understood. This land was never meant to be taken back. It was meant to be shared. And the decision he feared was becoming clear, even if the cost was still unknown. The days grew heavier as the rancher tried to hold everything together. Inside him, two paths pulled in opposite directions. One path was clear and practical. It had rules, papers, and a clean ending. The other path had no clear shape. It was built from quiet moments, shared work, and feelings he had tried to bury for years. He told himself he still had time, but deep down he knew time was running out. The lawyer called again. This time his voice was firm. The documents were ready. Delaying any longer would bring questions, maybe even trouble. The rancher thanked him and said he would come soon. When the call ended, he sat in silence, staring at the wall. The house felt smaller than ever. That afternoon, he rode his horse toward the hills. He had not ridden in years, but the movement felt natural, like his body remembered before his mind did. From the rise above the shelter, he watched the widow and her children working together. One child carried water. Another gathered firewood. The smallest sat nearby, humming softly. There was no rush, no complaint, just steady effort. He realized something then. They were not waiting for him to decide their future. They were living. Later that day, a neighbor came by. The man was friendly but direct. He spoke of land values rising, of buyers asking questions, of opportunity slipping away. "You don't owe anyone anything," the neighbor said. "Your father's gone. This is your chance." The rancher nodded, but his chest tightened. That night he dreamed again of his father. This time the older man stood between the main house and the hills. He did not speak. He only placed a hand over his heart. The next morning the rancher went to the shelter early. The woman was kneading dough, her hands strong and sure. The children looked up when they saw him. "I need to talk," he said. She wiped her hands and listened. "I may be forced to make a decision soon," he said. "People are asking questions." She nodded. "We are ready to leave if we must." The words cut deeper than he expected. "You shouldn't have to be," he said. She looked at him closely. "Then why do you hesitate?" He had no answer. That afternoon, trouble came in a different form. A group from town arrived asking about the land. They were polite but curious. They noticed the shelter. They asked who lived there. The rancher felt the weight of their eyes, the quiet judgment, the need for simple answers to complex truths. "They are guests," he said. The woman stood tall beside her children. She did not speak, but her presence said enough. After the group left, the rancher felt shaken. The outside world was pressing in now. This was no longer a private struggle. A few days later, the children followed him as he repaired a fence near the old creek. One asked why he had left the land before. He paused, hammer in hand. "Because it hurt too much," he said. The child nodded as if that answer made sense. That evening, the woman brought him food. They sat quietly, watching the sun sink behind the hills. "You carry a lot alone," she said. "So do you," he replied. She smiled softly. "I have them." He understood then what she meant. Strength did not always come from standing alone. The final push came sooner than he expected. A formal notice arrived. The process had begun. His name was on it. The choice was no longer distant. It was right in front of him. That night he walked the land one last time, trying to see it as something to sell, something to leave behind. But all he saw were memories layered over new life. His father's work, the children's laughter, the quiet promise of mornings not spent alone. Before sunrise, he made his decision. He went to the shelter as the sky lightened. The woman was already awake. She looked at his face and knew something had changed. "I am not selling," he said. She said nothing at first. Then slowly she bowed her head. "I will find a way to protect this place," he continued, "for all of us." The children watched, not fully understanding but sensing relief. The path ahead was still uncertain. There would be questions, challenges, and sacrifice. But for the first time since he returned, the rancher felt steady. He was no longer running. He was staying. The morning after his decision felt different, as if the land itself had taken a deep breath. The rancher woke early, before the sun had fully risen. Light crept through the window, soft and steady. For the first time since he returned, he did not feel the urge to leave the house quickly. He sat quietly, listening to the sounds outside. Birds, wind, life moving forward. He knew the choice he had made would not solve everything overnight. There were still papers to deal with, people to answer, and plans to reshape. But the weight that had pressed on his chest for so long had eased. He felt clear. Later that day, he went to town. He met with the lawyer and explained his decision. The lawyer was surprised, even doubtful. He spoke about risks and responsibilities. The rancher listened carefully, then repeated his choice without raising his voice. This was not a sudden feeling anymore. It was a promise. When he returned, the children ran toward him. They did not ask questions. They only smiled. The woman watched from a distance, her expression calm, but her eyes filled with quiet relief. Over the next weeks, the rancher began to truly work the land again. Not alone, but together. He showed the children how to mend fences, how to care for tools, how to read the sky before rain. They listened closely, eager to learn. In return, they taught him patience, how to slow down, how to notice small joys he had long ignored. The woman never asked for more than she needed. She worked beside him, shoulder to shoulder. They spoke often now, not just about the land, but about life, about loss, about hope. There was no rush, no expectation, just understanding. Neighbors noticed the change. Some questioned it, others respected it. Over time, the noise faded. What remained was the rhythm of shared days. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the rancher stood near the old fence line with the woman. "My father would have liked this," he said quietly. She nodded. "He already did," the rancher smiled. Months passed, the land slowly healed, grass returned, the shelter was strengthened, the main house filled with warmth again, laughter replaced silence. Even on hard days there was purpose. One night sitting under the stars, the rancher realized something important. He had come to reclaim land, but what he found was belonging. Not ownership, not control, but connection. The widow and her children were no longer guests. They were family in the truest sense of the word. The land did not belong to one man anymore. It belonged to everyone who cared enough to stay. And for the first time in many years, the rancher felt at home.